everybody. I am very excited to introduce to you today. She actually needs no introduction. Deran Young, who is a retired military therapist. Keep that in mind as background. The founder of Black Therapist Rock and the author with Brene Brown. Remind me the title again.
Yes, it's called You Are Your Best Thing.
Yes, what a great title. You are your best thing. And Duran and I met at the Psychotherapy Networker Conference maybe 5, 6 years ago, I think.
I have the picture on my phone. It was a really nice picture.
Yes.
And I want to say it was 3 years ago, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Time flies.
Time flies. Yeah. Right. So I tell me what you're doing now.
Yeah. So what I'm mainly doing now is working with Monica Williams, Dr. Monica Williams at the University of Ottawa. In her research lab, she does research on topics kind of at the intersection of culture and mental health. And that's been my passion since my undergraduate degree, which I got in 2005, and it was in social psychology. So although I'm a therapist, I really love looking at groups and different dynamics in society and both positive and negative, the systemic oppression or ways that we can kind of solutions to systemic oppression as a collective um, pr- approach, if you will. So most of my work in the military was with groups. It was I realized that was my specialty of what I love doing, working with families, working with couples, and realizing that when we come together, there's something very therapeutic in just that, being able to bring people together so that they can all be heard and seen. And that's kind of what I did when I created Black Therapist Rock,
Oh,
unintentionally
I
created
was
this
thinking the same thing.
Facebook group of, at the time it was 20,000 Black mental health professionals within the first year, and now we're up to 33,000 Black mental health professionals. And what I'm realizing is people just wanted a space to be heard and seen.
Right.
And sometimes that looks like creating something on Facebook or Instagram, even where folks can just use their voice or be heard.
Right. And what I've really been impressed with is how Black Therapists Rock have increased access to all kinds of trainings, right? Which generally being able to participate in trainings takes money and money takes having to establish um, some kind of career that pays you well
Mhm.
because trainings are not cheap.
No, they're not. And I thought they were when I first created Black Therapist Rock, because all of
Mm.
my trainings were free from the military. We would get money every year and be flown to places to maintain our expertise. You have to be very trauma informed and kind of, an expert on many different forms of PTSD in the military, because I was working with sexual assault, I was working with child abuse, I was working with domestic violence, and I was working with people who are returning from war, and also being one of those people at the same time, one of those folks that are also maybe returning from war and having to figure out how to integrate those experiences into my own life personally. And so going back to what you were saying, it's like, yeah, sometimes we create the things that we need unintentionally. And when I transitioned from the military, I realized like, oh, I don't even know how I'm going to maintain my CEUs because I'm not used to paying $5,000 for a training. I'm not used to it, and I'm transitioning. I'm actually, for the better part, unemployed coming out of
Yeah.
the military. I didn't have an income. A lot of people thought I did because I was a leader of this big organization, but they forget that it's a nonprofit organization. So I wasn't receiving a salary, and then I needed access to these same trainings that I was recommending, such as IFS. When I came out of the military, I went into an IFS program. I didn't know at the time what IFS was, but I was personally kind of enrolled in this trauma day center, a
Mhm.
trauma day center where they particularly used IFS in group settings. And it was predominantly women who were working with sexual abuse, sexual trauma, either from our childhood or recently. And I had still not dealt with my own childhood sexual abuse and hadn't looked at how that was showing up in my relationships and my parenting and in my overall life and my health. I had just had my thyroid removed, completely removed at 35.
Wow.
So I needed to figure out how to work with my hormones and my nervous system, and particularly how not to live from a state of adrenaline because
Right.
I was 18 years old when I joined the military and getting a graduate degree in education while I was, simultaneously serving the country. So I was living off of adrenaline. That was pretty much all I knew for 36 years. And
Right.
so I needed to learn something new. And thankfully, I love telling people that I was introduced to IFS as a patient, as someone who needed to get to know my parts and my younger selves and see how that fragmentation was actually really killing me. It was bad for my health in a major way.
Right. And I think so many people don't realize that they're living on adrenaline.
Well,
Right.
if you're living in survival, the way I look at it now, because the
Right.
reason they don't realize it is because we use a lot of terminology, particularly in mental health and in health, and folks don't always have the health literacy to match it. So I like to say that therapy talk is a whole different language. And until someone translates it for you, you don't have an idea of what they're actually saying. And for me, I'm realizing people can understand living in survival. They can understand not having access to resources that they really should have or could have, to introduce that as an idea that if you grew up without parents that were emotionally present and aware, or that they didn't have the privilege, the financial privilege to be attuned and aware and present, then it's not about fault or it's not about blame. And that's why that book, You Are Your Best Thing, we looked at vulnerability and shame because oftentimes we blame in order to avoid shame.
Right.
And I tell people that shame stands for should have already mastered everything. And working with Brene, I got to see like, oh, this productivity push inside of me that always wants to go after the next thing and accomplish something new or different, some next level that I was always chasing. It started in childhood because I was working against my fear of not surviving.
Right. Right. Absolutely. But you're so many people don't think, oh, I was traumatized as a kid. And it was just how it was. And so they don't realize that they've been running for their lives their whole lives.
Mhm. I can feel it in my body. I just didn't know how to turn it off. When I would pay attention to my body, because another thing about running off of adrenaline is you're typically numb. I was numb. I'll speak for myself. But I was very numb to some of the sensations in my body that I now can feel because I've been intentional and I've utilized something more than talk therapy. Sometimes it takes more than that to really get to the biology of what's happening. But now looking back and feeling the difference, if you don't know a difference, you have nothing
Yeah,
to compare it to.
absolutely.
It was the norm. And I think a lot of people think, oh, well, that's just, life is hard and that's what people suffer. And if you're in poverty or if you come from a family that migrated here, we just did what we had to do. And that's normal. That's what our whole community was doing. And so if that's the case, it's difficult to see not only that this is problematic, but that it's actually detrimental to your body.
Right, right, right. And then, I think for a lot of people, you grow up on adrenaline, and so then you live that adrenaline life, even if you're safe as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're doing more, you're, you know, working 24 hours a day, you're going to graduate school and you're in the military and
Mm-hmm.
you're raising kids
Mm-hmm.
and and
And et cetera, et cetera.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right.
Yes. And I was just thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about the difference of being safe and feeling safe. I had to learn what it meant to feel safe.
Right.
I mean, growing up in poverty, in the quote unquote hood in the projects, you would be a fool. To feel safe in an environment where you are actually not safe would not be sane.
Yeah,
So, I
I
mean,
agree.
your guards up all the time. Of course, hypervigilance is a thing. And even when I came out of the military, like I said, I knew intellectually, okay, those threats are not here anymore. But how do I rewire my nervous system to acknowledge that, to see that?
Right.
And I'm not, I think it was Dana or someone, a friend of mine, I got it from a friend of mine. Her name is Lou Lassen. We went to IFS training together back in 2018. So we've been talking parts for a long time,
Yeah.
her and my good friend Marsha. Anyway, Lou always says, look for signs of safety. And that language again, it wasn't therapy
Ah,
talk. It wasn't, oh, pay attention to your nervous system or take a deep breath, do box breathing. It wasn't any of that. It was look for signs of safety. Something very simple, but so important and so helpful for me in my own journey of, undoing the adrenaline rush.
mm,
Was okay. What and people talk about grounding. That to me too can be a very scientific technical concept. So I never, I've struggled a little bit with grounding, but I can look around and say what feels safe, what feels safe, not, am I safe, because my brain doesn't know what to do with that, but what feels safe around me in this moment.
right. Right. Absolutely. And I think that's brilliant. I agree with you. I think grounding is something that people fall back on, that the therapists fall
Mm,
back on. But actually, there are a lot of things we have to do first before we can ground.
exactly. I like in IFS, one of the things I love too is being able to unblend from that part.
Right.
So when I'm looking for something that feels safe or even familiar sometimes, because safety can sometimes be familiar, um, for example, I'll give an experience where I was looking for signs of safety. I was in some parts of where I live in Maryland can be very rural and remind me of Texas. And I grew up in a rural part of Texas where the KKK is still kind of active and present.
Wow.
But growing up, I would see burning crosses. They did rallies. It was very much. They were very visible and like I said, very real. And they also had power. It could be the sheriff. It could be the judge. It could be your teacher or the person married to the teacher. So it felt like it was always present.
Right.
And when I go to some rural places, either upstate New York or Maryland or Pennsylvania, because I love to be in those places, they feel like home to me at times. However, then I start to feel also uncomfortable or not safe. And so I'll look for something or someone, and it could be an animal sometimes. It could be, watching animals and knowing that they're safe, or, that, okay, then maybe I can start to feel that too, or
Mm,
watching the trees and they just exist. They're just there. They're not needing to prove anything or they're not intimidated by anything. And so a lot of times for me, it's nature. But it could also be, just seeing another Black person in the town. Because if it's a super white town and I see people of color, I'm like, okay, they seem to feel safe.
right.
Maybe I can, co-regulate with them or find a way to mirror what they're experiencing. Um, so a lot of people just haven't, their parents didn't show them what safety felt like.
Yeah. And their
If your
parents didn't feel
parents,
safe.
if your parents are in
Correct.
survival and they haven't been given those skills, they haven't had the privilege or the access to learn those skills. It's again not about blame. It's just oftentimes,
Or it hasn't been safe. Right? That's what when I think about racial trauma, you know, trauma is not just something happening. It's the it's the anticipation that it could and will happen. And
mhm. And not only that, someone taught me also, in addition, that trauma is being overwhelmed, that your body or your nervous system is overwhelmed and you have nothing to soothe it.
right,
So when we're children, we hopefully have parents that can help soothe our nervous system from the time that we're outside of the womb. If you don't have that, then you start to learn that no one's coming, that it's all on me, and that hyper independent part of us that feels like we have to do everything on our own steps into overdrive, and there goes the adrenaline rush. We're on because that's all we know. We've probably been on since we were in the womb when our parents were
all
on.
right.
I've really been looking at cortisol levels. That's one of the issues that I have with the new autoimmune disorder that I was recently diagnosed with. I'm realizing that it was a cortisol and inflammation issue. And they say that even in utero, if a mother has high cortisol levels, it can be transferred to the child, the unborn child, or to the
Right. I think the
fetus.
same it's true of adrenaline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So sometimes you're born into these things And the norm in that family or in that environment is to just be on and to never let your guard down or to never let them see you sweat, quote unquote, and pretend as though everything is fine.
Right, right, right. And it's so, and you're saying it's really, it's happening at a body level, so we're not necessarily aware. I mean, I'm thinking of, you know, feeling this pressure. I got to watch my back. I got to get this done. I've got to already know this. You don't think I'm putting my body through something.
Mm-hmm.
You think I got to get this done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I became a machine, especially in the military. That's the expectation. Even in my childhood and in those violent neighborhoods, you're not a person. You become very armored.
Right.
So even before I was in the military, it was like I was preparing for war all the time and then putting on the armor and, gearing up. And so I had to learn that another acronym that I have is that I'm a human. Humbly understanding mistakes are necessary. Will some threats get through the threshold? Yes. I will be vulnerable to threats. There will be risks. There will be uncertainty. There's no magic wand that's going to make every threat go away. And I wanted to learn how to navigate life, knowing that, yes, there are going to be risky situations and people and predators out in the world. How do I prepare myself so that I'm okay to interact with those things and take care of myself, to advocate for myself, to set the necessary boundaries? When you're more informed about what's happening, what I say is the biology of your biography. First I had to look at the biography, like, oh, what have I experienced in my life? How has this impacted my relationships or the way that I navigate the world, feeling unsafe, and what happens when I feel unsafe? How do I respond versus really being present? I go back into, my childhood and use a childhood behavior or a childhood mechanism that was adaptive then and it's not so helpful now. It helped me get through the childhood, it helped me get through the military. And now that I want something different from my life, it's not going to take me where I want to go.
Right. And the thing that I always keep remembering is these are instinctive behaviors. It's not like you can,
Mm,
okay, tomorrow I'm going to slow my pace by 30%, because you're going to wake
mm,
up and your body is going to be going. And, and I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is, people who are traumatized are not continuing to have symptoms on purpose,
mhm.
right? It's like,
It's like your nervous system is hijacked. It's definitely not a conscious choice.
right.
It reminds me of so last year I had a medical emergency at 42, ended up in the ICU, which was very life changing, of course.
Right.
But immediately after I got out, I was in the hospital for about a 6 weeks total of a stay. And when
Wow.
I got out, my first question the next morning was, what am I gonna do? And I was able to see that part of myself. It was like, we gotta be productive, we gotta get things done. And I laugh at her because I'm like, girl, you're in bandages, you can barely walk, your feet are swollen, you might need a wheelchair today. We don't know how life is going to be in this new type of body. So we got to like back it up, slow it down, back it up, and just figure out, what do we need, not what am I going to do, what do I actually need?
Right. 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 Or what will help my body recover
Right.
best?
And it was like a good couple of weeks before I was able to actually turn the dial down. As you said, it was this very instinctual drive inside of me that just wanted to do something, be purposeful. Really, I think it's our innate need to be purposeful, and that's what I realized. It felt like I was losing sense of why I'm even alive.
Right.
And I think that's also instinctual too, to want to be used to the planet or to your community or to contribute to something in some way. And so I had to balance that I have a body that needs to slow down and be taken care of, and I have this strong desire to contribute as long as I'm here.
Right. And it's hard to think my best contribution is slowing down and helping my body recover. That
And
is
even deeper than that, Janine, what I realize is my best contribution is my full presence,
right. Right.
is my healed self. So I can be fully present with my kid. I can be fully present in my relationships. I can be fully present to myself.
Right. Right. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And it's complicated to get to the point where you can say my biggest contribution is being fully present.
Especially as a work addict, like a bona fide certified workaholic, people pleaser, codependent. I'm in several 12-step programs, and they all kind of summarize to the fact that I am an adult child of an addict. My mother struggled with several addictions. Many of our parents struggled with addictions
Right.
that we didn't recognize back then. We didn't recognize work as, especially for Black people. It's like, what do you mean? We worked for our country for free for years, for decades. What do you mean that's an addiction? That's not even something we asked for. It was just thrown at us. And so in IFS, we call these things legacy burdens. These traumas that are passed down and around are really hard to unwire, almost next to impossible through just traditional talk therapy. So that's actually how I found my way into psychedelic assisted therapy. Because although my brain knew intellectually, I knew I'd gotten multiple degrees in mental health related topics, psychology, sociology, learning neuroscience didn't help. Learning things helped that intellectual part of me that wants to practice new things, sure.
Right.
But when my nervous system is hijacked and I'm completely overwhelmed and flooded, and my strongest instinctual desire is to dissociate, the brain is completely shut off. It's like I'm working with my reptilian part of my brain just in animal mode, and I needed something more. So I discovered psychedelic assisted therapy. The first session that I ever had was ketamine assisted therapy. I was working with Pill Trip Health at the time, as an advisor to help them diversify their therapists. For places like DC and Atlanta, they knew they were going to need to have diverse staff. And so at first I was deadly afraid of this stuff because I thought I was going to lose my mind. And then I read the book by Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind. So it's like you could change your mind without losing it. That was really important for me to know,
Yeah.
that I could
Really important.
expand without feeling like I was going to get lost in it and everything, or just dissociate, kind of becoming in a permanent dissociative state. That was some of my fears because I also have a mother who struggles with schizophrenia. So there's, a heightened fear around losing my mind for me because I grew up with someone who didn't always have stability of their mental thoughts, and any mental health issue, and depression, anxiety. I think these are all kind of spectrums of feeling like you're not fully aware of what's inside your head. And
Right.
so I had all this fear about, getting crazier. And I experienced the ketamine assisted therapy, and it was the first time that I actually felt what it meant to be embodied.
Wow.
At This was in 2020, so not that long ago, 5 years ago. And I remember saying, we were in an integration circle with the facilitator, the doctor, and I said, "This is what people mean when they say they feel embodied. They feel things in their body."
Wow.
Because it wasn't safe for me to feel my body in the military. You didn't even own your body.
Right.
They
Right.
tell you your body is government property.
Yes.
So, and with anything that comes out of your body doesn't even belong to you. It's like my child. They tell you, we want you to have a family, we would have issued you one. So I know when I first would say that to other military, if I say that today still to military members, they're like, oh yeah, they're still very much numb to that statement. When I say it to anyone who's in the mental health or therapy world, I get that reaction. And that's what helps me understand the difference between a traumatized nervous system and one that's very much numb to the trauma versus someone who's embodied and can feel things.
Right. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
so I didn't own my body in childhood, poverty, hunger, homelessness, all of those things really take us out of our body for good reasons. It's not a good idea to be in there. It's overwhelming. And so I lived most of my life in a very dissociated state and, tried to produce my way and success my way out of trauma and realized, I hit a brick wall when my thyroid was taken out. And then I hit another wall about 8 years later when I had the medical emergency last year and realized my life depends on me being more embodied.
Right, 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 right. Wow. So you really kind of had to be hit over the head by a giant rock before you could say, okay, I guess this isn't working.
Yeah, I mean, because like you said, it takes time to integrate this new way of living into your life. So even after, with psychedelics, like I said, from 2020, I had other experiences since then. I've become a very big advocate of plant medicine and psychedelic assisted therapy because there are so many things that are very hard to talk your way out of. That it's
Right,
going to take a biological rewiring for you to really start to. So eating fast food every day was normal to me.
right.
I mean, things that, again, you're saying, well, like if I said this to most millennials who are working and maybe even don't have children, but especially if you're a working mother,
Right.
I tell people, working
Or
mothers, we're
working single
expected to,
mother at that.
well, I was divorced. I did start off single, and that was a transition, having to kind of adjust to not having my partner anymore in the as a captain in the military who's on call and, kind of on demand all the time. But I tell people that for me, what I experienced as a mother was that I was supposed to work like I didn't have children, yet still raise my child as though I didn't have a job.
Wow.
So it felt like a lot of shame in both arenas, where the parental shame was if you don't show up for this person, they're going to be just as traumatized as you,
Right.
trying to avoid passing on the trauma. But even at work, especially as a therapist or a healer or anyone in the helping profession, you feel like you need to give and give and give. And now, like I said, fast forward, I realized the one thing I can give is my presence. I can't fix, I can't save anyone. That was a childhood part of me
Yeah.
that came into this field to, save people, quote unquote, and realizing I can't even save myself. I have to have a higher power and things outside of me to help me be a normal functioning human being.
Right. I'm a huge believer in 12-step work.
Mm,
I remember Judy Herman used to say that she wished every trauma survivor could be in some 12-step program because it's the best treatment for trauma.
absolutely. I would agree with that. And
Yeah.
it's a spiritual aspect, which we don't always cover in
Right.
the health world or in the mental health world, particularly.
Yes.
So that's what it gave me, this bigger picture of purpose and vision and just the existential things of life. However, I want to say that, for a lot of people of color and even women, going into 12-step spaces for a long time, for until recently, I would say until before, right after COVID or during COVID. But before that, it was very white spaces, very white male dominated. And I hear women talking about going to meetings in person and being the only woman in the room, and they're talking about relationship issues or attachment trauma and not necessarily feeling comfortable wanting to talk about sex in front of men, or sexual trauma, especially in front of men. So now, what I love is that there are online spaces where it makes it much more accessible around the world. I mean, there are 12-step groups. I've met people in South Africa, in Kenya, I mean, all over the world. And not only that, that there are particularly spaces for people of color, specifically spaces that are Black or Indigenous, spaces where even I have a group I go to on Thursday specifically for Black women because there are certain issues that are different based on your culture.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And based on your gender. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've, there've always been women's meetings. I remember helping clients hook up with meetings, like noon meetings uh,
Mm-hmm.
for younger professionals,
Mm.
right?
Nice.
So, so my clients would meet people like themselves at a noon meeting, whereas if they went to an after work meeting, it would be older men, usually.
Mm. Mm-hmm. And we don't realize, I had to realize that with the traumas that come with collective issues such as patriarchy and racism, the intersection of patriarchy, racism, and classism for me, I had to realize that there were people that symbolized fear in my mind. So when I was looking for signs of safety, there were certain people that I would never go towards because either they were wealthy or they grew up wealthy, and it would trigger something. I like the word activate better because
Yeah.
trigger has a violent kind of connotation to it, but it would activate those younger parts of me that felt less than. And that was something for me to go and pay attention to. So sometimes I'll go to a meeting where there are people that are not like me so that I can see what comes up, what's activated inside of me that still needs my presence or still needs to be held and worked with.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. But that it reminds me of the 12 steps saying, take what's useful and leave the rest.
Mhm.
Like teaching yourself to not be hyper focused on what's activating or what doesn't work,
Mhm.
but look for those little crumbs that are
Mhm.
inspirational
Mhm.
and take those away.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also just allowed me to look at power dynamics very differently. Because we talk a lot about right sizing yourself. So not seeing anyone as above you and not seeing anyone beneath you. That
Right.
in that space we are all here because we are all humans with a problem. And
Right.
our problem is that we think we are the higher power, that we can control our lives and others.
Oh,
One of the another phrases that I get so many phrases from 12 steps, but another phrase has been very soothing to my nervous system when I'm in that parental shame space is the fact that God doesn't have grandchildren. Whatever your definition of God, some people
yeah.
say God is grow or die or a group of dudes, whatever your definition of God is, that higher power, the power that's higher than you, does not look at your child as a grandchild.
Right.
It doesn't see you as their higher power and then consult with you about what to do for them, that they are living their own separate lives. And that's also helped me kind of on both sides of the generations, with the folks that came before me, my ancestors and my elders, having more compassion for them, that they didn't always have access to the same things that I have access to. And I can do the work so that my son can have, a whole different experience and he's going to have access to things I could only dream of.
Right. 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 Which is such a wonderful thing about being a parent.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also we talked before about the kind of neglect of issues having to do not exclusively, but mostly with women,
Mm,
even in the
hmm.
mental health field.
Hmm. I'm wondering recently how many therapists are talking to their clients about perimenopause because no one told me, and I felt very blindsided at the hot flashes and the
Yeah.
mood changes, the irritability, the
Right.
joint stiffness. I have so many things going on with my body.
Right.
And I also wonder if enough therapists are not being trained in the health aspects of mental health. Mental health implies that there's a body involved, not
Right.
just the brain. So
Right.
I sometimes blame the field because I know all of my training was pretty much, from the top up, from the top down, sorry.
Exactly.
That we start with the brain and kind of maybe think about the consideration of the body. And I'm glad that nowadays people like you and Bessel and Gabor are talking about the body and the brain as part of the body versus separate.
Right. Right. But I'm thinking counselor training, social work training,
Mhm.
psychology training. There isn't a word about how medical conditions and psychological conditions interact. I have known so many, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of trauma survivors who have had thyroid issues and and hundreds and hundreds of trauma survivors with MS.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in my 45 years of practice, I think I've met maybe two people with MS who did not have trauma histories. And every single other person had trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so in graduate school, somebody should tell us, hey, guess what? You know, people's psychology affects their immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, I know when I was in graduate school, there were two words that I really despised. Every time I heard it, it felt like a dirty word. It was dissociation. Like if the person's dissociated, how dare they? I was
Oh, I
like, well, of
know.
course. It makes sense that they would leave the
Right.
room when they're uncomfortable. What do you mean? Why is it such a big deal? Why do we make it so complicated? And the other word was somatization, that if you had an ache or something that was because of stress, and it we just kind of avoided talking about it or discounted it altogether in the health
Right.
space.
Or kind of in your head,
Right,
like
right.
being a
All you have to do is unthink that thought, and then you won't have that pain.
right.
Especially around like chronic pain. There was a lot of in fibromyalgia. I remember in the military there was a big to do about that not being a real diagnosis. A lot of, that there wasn't a lot of scientific evidence about it. And it's like, we don't have scientific evidence because you don't study women.
Right.
It's not because the data's not there or that these issues don't exist. These things are not a priority in the health space.
Right.
So I'm actually working on a book because I've been so passionate about looking at how patriarchy shows up in health and
Right.
how women are dying
Mhm.
from that legacy burden that's very much unspoken often. And the book that I'm writing is called Good Girls Have Bad Health,
Oh, wow. That is a great title.
because we're conditioned to be good and to
Mhm.
to be pleasing and to be adaptable. But what is that actually doing to your nervous system, to your biology? There's not a lot of education and information about that. And because it impacted me personally, I was like, this message needs to be out in the world. This is something that I feel very important about getting out to the masses. Whether we can't wait for research or
Right.
the education system to acknowledge that these things are real because they are very much steeped in patriarchy itself.
Right. Right.
You know.
Right. Right. I mean, you're making me think about how girls are taught not to complain publicly of
Mm-hmm.
menstrual cramps
Mhm.
by the
Or
time
even acknowledge that you have a vagina in any way.
right, right. Or God forbid you have your period,
Right.
and how that's such a young age to learn, you know, if you're in physical pain, just act normal.
And push through it. That was what I learned, like when
Exactly.
you still have to go to work. I remember in my military uniform being in meetings and leading meetings with, generals and the base commanders and literally having breast milk, leaking through and having to put on my sweater and cover it up and to pretend like, oh no, there's nothing happening here. I'm fine. But just having to ignore your body, whether it's going to the bathroom too much, quote unquote, not
Right.
wanting to drink water because then I'll have to go to the bathroom and I'll have to acknowledge that I'm a human. Anytime that our bodies we're disconnected from our body, it's the system that wins, not us.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm so glad that our listeners are getting these messages because I think, for all the interest in somatics over the last 10 years, um, and people do have been listening to this idea that the body keeps the score, but it's like an intellectual idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're making it real. It's
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is an intellectual idea, but it's also a real experience in people's bodies
Mm-hmm.
that has a profound effect on their lives.
Yeah. The
Turn
number of years that we were on the planet actually,
Right.
reduces the number of years we have to live.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this has been such a great, great conversation. I could keep talking uh, for days, I think. Thank you so much, Deran. I really, really appreciate it. I'm sure our listeners appreciate being able to share this conversation.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah.